Hello and welcome to another episode of Cake Fight Presents The Making of Kaleidoscope. I'm writer, director, producer Paige Feldman, and this week, as every week, I am taking you inside my process of making my debut feature film. We're going from idea to premiere in real time. So, last week, I told you all about my great brainstorming technique, which very few of you watched, and I'm pretty sure it's because the thumbnail sucks. So if you missed it, because this brainstorming technique is magic, check it out up above. I'm gonna link you to it. All right, this week though, I had finished or gotten my outline really solid, and I sent it off to some trusted readers. Now, some of those trusted readers were my writing group, and I'll get to that at a later date, but another one was David Wappel. So David is a fantastic screenwriting consultant and a screenwriter himself. He has a pretty big presence on Twitter, which I know a lot of you follow me there and have come over to YouTube, so hi. And so you probably know David. If you don't, you definitely should though. He is really intuitive about story, he asks great questions, and he also is helpful in that he offers himself as a sounding board to writers. It's not just about giving notes, it's about helping you talk through your issues in your story. So I had booked a talk story session, which is the session that we had with him a while ago. I did one prior to starting the outline of Kaleidoscope, and our session inspired me to answer the 36 questions that lead to love and really dig into what makes Lee and Jonah great characters separately, but more importantly, great characters in a relationship together. So I had another talk story session with David, and I sent him my outline, and we had an hour and a half chat about all things Kaleidoscope. And today I'm going to share with you 5 different questions that I had and he had, 5 total, and the answers that we talked through. And sometimes there were no answers, and sometimes those answers revealed things about the story that I didn't even think of. Some obvious, some not. So why don't we roll those credits, and then I'll intro you in to question number 1. So welcome back from the credits. Before we dive into the first of these 5 questions about Kaleidoscope that I discussed with David, I want to give you a little bit of context into the first one. Then we'll come back afterwards, do a little wrap up, and then I will give you more context for number 2, etc. So this first question has to do with a scene called Scene ? Yeah, I really needed help with this one. It is a scene I put at the very end of Act 2B, so right into the break to 3, which is sometimes known as the dark night of the soul. The really bad thing that happens to these characters is right there. And I added it right before sending this outline off to Wappel because I realized I didn't have this big break between Lee and Jonah. The time loop ended, but Lee and Jonah's relationship wasn't fractured. And I needed to fix that. I didn't quite know where to place it, so I just put question mark at the end of Act 2B and hoped we could talk about it, and we did. It was the first thing I brought up. So, a quick bit of context. I talk a lot about a car accident here. The very first party, which is where the time loop ends up playing out, but the original events are that Lee and her boyfriend Devin, who is Jonah's best friend, have a fight. Lee is so just mean and cruel to Devin that Devin drags Jonah away with him, or maybe Jonah drags Devin. Either way, they leave the party. And they get into a car accident. Devin is pretty grievously injured. Jonah, who was driving, walks away relatively unscathed. Devin sees that car accident as a chance to reset his life. And so he ends things with Lee, and Lee did not want that. Despite her cruelness in the moment, she wants the security that Devin provides. Jonah, on the other hand, is hiding something. He was driving the car. Everyone thinks that there was some idiot driver, someone who was texting, not paying attention. In reality, Jonah got a panic attack because his stand-up set that he was doing at the party didn't go that great. And he starts spiraling and thinking, and he is driving, and the panic attack becomes so intense that he starts getting tunnel vision. He can't see, he can't focus, and in the middle of this anxiety attack, he crashes the car. It's not anyone else's fault, it's Jonah's fault. And so in this scene, I wonder, should finding out that Jonah actually caused the car accident be the thing that causes Lee and Jonah's break? The other thing that's important to know about this car accident and the panic attack is that Jonah's panic attack in the car sort of spills over into his regular life. And because the trigger for it was doing poorly at stand-up, it creates stage fright that he never had. So he gets up on stage and he remembers being in the car, remembers being panicked, that tunnel vision, everything, and he can't say a word on stage. So that's all the context for this scene, and we get into some great stuff, including the dichotomy of very sexy stuff that I want to include in Kaleidoscope, and the idea that sex is important and should be saved in the romantic comedy for a moment that's pivotal in the emotional relationship as well. It's all really cool stuff, so I am gonna send you over to that conversation, and the angle in the Zoom was really bad on me, guys, so please don't judge me. We're friends now. I'm comfortable sharing my no makeup mess that is me in this Zoom call. You know, I look cuter than that in real life, or most real lives. So don't judge. Enjoy this question, and when we get back, I'll tell you more about the next one.
Yeah, but I read all of it. I was able to follow it pretty easily, like, you know, how you kind of did act one, sequence one,
Yeah.
scene one, and then would go through. So yeah, I understood that. And yeah, happy to kind of talk about really whatever is on your mind about it. I feel super familiar with it. So
cool. So I think my biggest question is in like under sequence 9, they have a scene card that's just scene question mark, and it's Lee and Jonah have a falling out. Like, I realized as I was rereading the outline before I sent it to you that I didn't have, you know, the iconic big fight in every romantic comedy, and that's like one of my favorite things to write. And I also didn't have the reveal that Jonah was the one that actually caused the car accident, and that's a secret that he's been holding back. But I don't. Initially, I thought, well, that would be like Lee finds that out, and that's why they have that falling out. But I don't understand. In this version of the story, I don't understand why that would be the case, because in a previous version of the story, Lee's friends all ostracized her for breaking up with Devin, and Jonah kind of went along with it when really he was the reason that Devin even got in the accident in the first place. And also it was set in a high school, and there's different emotional maturity between a high school and 30 somethings.
Sure.
So I want to figure this big fight out, and also this panic attack stuff, how that fits in, because his mental health and his anxiety is directly related to why he gets the stage fright and all that. So it's important. I just kind of don't know where it fits.
Yeah, sure. Well, and is one of the concerns that like that Lee finding out that Jonah was, you know, partly responsible for the car accident because of a panic attack, that if she blames him for that, and like that's the conflict, that's a little bit, I don't know, surface level, or not empathetic to his like mental health, or
it's not empathetic to his mental health. Also, it's surface level because at this point in the story, Lee's like wants to be with Devin again, wants to be with her ex again.
right.
But the question is the car accident the reason that they broke up, or is it just something that happened after, like that messed the whole relationship up? Her getting mad at him for causing a car accident and lying about it, I don't know. there's something about it that's not sitting right with me. It feels
totally.
Yeah.
I think that her getting mad causing a car accident does feel it doesn't feel as interesting. The lie, I think that starts to feel like you didn't trust me to handle that in a way that is respectful of you, and so I think that's the thing, and I think that's also possibly what Jonah is afraid, like, Lee will be mad that he caused the accident, but Lee's not mad that he caused the accident, mad that he's keeping this part of his life secret from her, especially after they've like become so close, like emotionally intimate, and because they're the only two going through this experience, I think there's a level of honesty you'd want with each other, especially in regards to any sorts of events of that night. And I think that's the transgression that Lee is maybe responding to. And it might be even in this moment that I don't know if Lee would even be aware of how upset she would be at that moment. And I think that those feelings also indicate that there's maybe something deeper going on between her and Jonah than even her and Devin. So I think this falling out also takes Lee by surprise a little bit. And even Jonah might even say, like, I'm honestly surprised you care so much. And she's like, well, she might be a little bit caught up in the emotion, realize like, oh yeah, why do I care? Like I want to be with Devin. That's what I told myself. Why am I caring so much about you not being honest with me? Like, why do I want so much for you to be completely open with me? That falling out might also be the sort of internal discovery of like their true feelings for each other, I guess.
I feel like that feels like it's placed correctly for this potential, like scene 26 and a half, I guess, or for where it's sitting now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so I think what it is, it's that I think the information about what caused the car accident is kind of like if you think like the first domino, but that's not really the reason of their falling out. But that's what allows kind of a couple things to get revealed to eventually get to the core of like, is their falling out really about the fact that like neither one of them are aware they actually kind of want to be together, and like they're not saying it, and like that tension is just what's causing this. How much of that they're each conscious of, I'm not sure at this moment. I think not fully, and that's part of what like creates this kind of obstacle for full connection between them, and without a full connection you end up with this falling out because like they're unhappy.
So that actually brings to mind another question I have, because they're going to have sex at some point before this whole thing, probably in scene 21.
Right now, I was going to say, right now you have it in 21.
Yeah, which is about where I want it, because the first kiss happens at the end of like at scene 20, and when you're 33, which is kind of where I see them at, like you kiss someone, like you're not going to like have that anxiety of, oh, should we sleep together, especially if you're living in a time loop where nothing you do affects anything that happens in the present day. Like you're bored, you don't know how long you're going to get stuck here. With all this, like, oh, we're not going to be prude about it. But on the other hand, there's these like sort of prudish implications within a romantic comedy where like the sex is the thing.
Right.
And creating this meaningless sex relationship, I mean, maybe it's a matter of this whole falling out happens in the real world.
Yeah.
Outside the time loop, that's when it's real. It's like being at camp. You remember being at camp and you had like a camp girlfriend, camp boyfriend, and then you like go out into the real world. And one of I had my first camp boyfriend was like, I called him like the day after we got home. I was like, how are you? He's like, I'm good, but there's a few girls I'm interested in at school, so I think we should just be friends.
Yeah.
I was like okay, so camp is a different world here.
Yeah. And is that so when they have sex, is that within the time loop?
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think you're able to kind of in a really clever way kind of have your cake and eat it too, in terms of like romantic comedy tropes of like, because you're absolutely right that like sex is kind of the consummation of the relationship, and they haven't really consummated their relationship because they haven't done it in the real world. So yeah, if that falling out happens in the real world, that's really great. And that like that sexual relationship that can even come up in that scene. Well, like, we slept together. Yeah, in the freaking party loop. Like,
So something I love about this conversation is that David helped me take a scene that I literally didn't even know what place it would have in the script, And I'm super excited to write this now because I feel like I know where it's going to be grounded emotionally, and it really ties in now to the real grown-up drama within this story. Because remember, if you don't hear, this script started out as a novel, a young adult novel about people in high school. The car accident and all that came after it was based on characters who were 17, not characters who were basically twice their age. So I'm really excited about how the shape of this new scene, which is now going to be the break into Act 3. Oh, and P.S., stick around to the end, because if you like what we talk about in this scene, it comes full circle. Next, we're going to rewind all the way to the beginning of the script. I had a question about scene 1, and it's about that fight that I told you about that Lee and Devin, her boyfriend, Jonah's best friend, have at the very beginning of the film.
I'm going to just look through the scenes quickly because I have a few questions that I wrote myself. So scene 1, the question, are these fights a regular thing or is it unusual? I don't know if this question is actually even important beyond just my own knowledge, but the idea is that Lee starts out here feeling very dissatisfied in all aspects of her life. And so she's taking it out on her boyfriend. So I don't know if that feels important to even answer that question beyond for me, or if it might be interesting to have it reverberate.
My gut would say that it's most useful if it's a regular thing, just because it's literally scene 1, so you're just trying to establish a status quo. If it's unusual, you have to establish, you just have to do a little bit more legwork in establishing why it's unusual. But I think we're looking for a status quo that then needs to be upended.
Very good point.
I think it also just makes it feel just a little bit more lived in, because nothing is sort of changed yet. There's nothing quote unquote unusual,
right?
Until the butterflies. It doesn't kind of preempt your story by saying this is unusual. If it's unusual, it would seem like Lee is already onto something that needs a change in her life. So if the butterflies didn't show up, maybe it would obviously be a totally different story, but Lee still might find this still might be a journey for her. And I think making it a regular thing might help indicate, like, if the butterflies didn't show up, like, nothing would change for these people. So, like, this is part of what they needed at this time,
right?
Because otherwise she's going to continue on with Devin, just, having maybe the same fight over and over.
Cool. Thank you. That's a very good point about scene 1. That was like, I was so stuck in the story that I did, like, the mechanics of story didn't even play a part. So thank you.
Sure.
So this is why notes from people who aren't in your head all the time and thinking about your script all the time and just obsessing about these details about the characters all the time are so fantastic and necessary, and also just an example of how great David is at story. Because while I was sitting here thinking, okay, so Lee and Devin, do they fight a lot? Do they fight a little? What's going to make sense for their relationship and for their characters? David just went and said, hey, scene 1, there needs to be a change in the status quo. That's basic story structure, basic information. And yeah, that's obviously the answer to this question. So yeah, thank you. All right, so this next question is all about how I have structured the first couple iterations of the time loop. The first time loop, it's in Lee's point of view. We don't know that Jonah's also in there. The second time, we figure out that Jonah's also in the time loop. And the third time, they find each other and figure out that they're both stuck in it. And my question has to do with, how do we make sure that this reveal that Lee's not alone in the time loop stays hidden, and that Lee and Jonah don't look like idiots for not figuring it out sooner?
I know when we last talked, you said I needed to kind of choose a POV, and I think Lee's going to be Lee. It's going to alternate between Lee and Jonah, but Lee's the one that we start with, and so she's our primary person just because the first thing you see on screen is the most important. So scene 7, the question is, we're in Lee's POV, but do we know that Jonah is also sucked in too? And I am thinking that for the audience, like an astute audience member would be able to see that Jonah's doing different things from the very first scene, the original party.
Right.
But we'd be so stuck with Lee that we wouldn't necessarily notice it. My hesitation with this is that why wouldn't Jonah be freaking the fuck out too? And like, why wouldn't they find each other immediately? And that's kind of the tension I have, unless it's just that's just the tension that I have.
Yeah, if you want to maintain that idea that we just see Lee's point of view, so that way you sort of retain that reveal of like, wait, Jonah's here too. Like I do think that's effective. Of kind of, we have this, okay, there's someone stuck in a time loop. That's one reveal. Oh wait, there's someone else in there with them. You don't have to do those at the same time. I think there is some effective ways to do it. So then I think it just becomes an obstacle of like, how do you avoid what feels like the obvious thing of like, why doesn't Jonah freak out too? And like, they realize that they're the only two who are not acting the exact same that they did at that original party. I think, yeah, you might have sort of Jonah, we might notice, whether it's in the background or in the margins somehow, notice that it's different. And then maybe Jonah makes a choice that like, just literally he does freak out, but it in a way that takes him out of Lee's point of view. So like, he freaks out and leaves the party, but we don't know that because we stay with Lee's point of view. And then later we see like kind of Jonah's first time going through that, or she says, why didn't you find me? He's like, I had no idea. I immediately left and went home because like something was up, or like I went out to the car because I knew that something was different, like, or but explain that his freak out carried him away from what we saw. Or is there a thing that like Jonah does freak out but like thinks he's dreaming and just kind of keeps it like he's freaking out internally, but decides like, this is very strange, I just need to play my part because like something is happening, so I am going to just pretend like everything is normal and not let anyone know that I'm freaking out. So outwardly he'll still appear to be normal, and then later we'll find out like, oh no, he was freaking out. Those are my two kind of off the head ways to like kind of get over that obstacle.
Cool.
How much did they interact in that original party?
So in the original party, it's very little. She doesn't like him at all, but he's her boyfriend's best friend. He's doing his usual clown thing. He's doing a little bit of stand-up at the party because his drunk friends like to laugh with him, and she mostly ignores him until Devin gets annoyed at their argument and decides to leave and pulls Jonah along with him.
Yeah.
Or Jonah pulls Devin along with, in passing. They see each other enough that there's going to be some sort of barb flung out between them. The line between love and hate is thin, and and all that. But there's beyond, I'm guessing like maybe a half page at most. They don't really interact.
Yeah, so it might be that first, maybe some of the work there will be not on scene 7, but in the earlier one of like figuring out how they interact so that it allows you that maneuverability in scene 7. And so and that might also even down to the geography of the party. So Devin might have to say, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm gonna go find Jonah, instead of saying, that's it, I'm out of here, Jonah, let's go.
This is sort of a great example of the concept of the note behind the note, or the question behind the question. Because my question was all about scene 7, but really the answer lies in all of the scenes in sequence 1. Because as long as I set up the first party so that Lee and Jonah have minimal interaction, but significant when they do, I will be able to keep that secret and make that reveal pop, and then make their discovery of each other feel really resonant. So I'm very excited about figuring out the first sequence and the shape of the original party. That's going to be, I knew it was going to be so important because obviously time loop, we're going to replay it a lot. But now I'm really feeling just how important it is thematically and logistically. And I think I'm going to have to take some time to really flesh that sequence 1, out before I even start writing, maybe even more than I might usually, because as long as I know what goes on there, I can really place a lot of cool events and character growth throughout the party as the time loop progresses. This has me thinking. This is really cool. All right, so the next question is about a subplot that I've been considering adding to Kaleidoscope. It is about Devin, again, Lee's boyfriend at the start of the film, Jonah's best friend. And Lee has a friend who is kind of into Devin, and in the YA version of this story, there was a friend who kind of stole him away, started dating him. She wasn't malicious, they just were a good fit, and Lee hated that someone was with her ex. But in the film version, first of all, I don't have the leeway in terms of time or space as a novel, because movies need to be a certain length if you're not Marvel or DC or Christopher Nolan. So I didn't want to overcomplicate matters, especially because I originally had just had a laundry list of subplots I wanted to include that I was in love with in the book version, and I've mostly gotten rid of them. But this one about Devin dating one of Lee's friends was really sticking with me, and so I decided to ask David what he thought about it and how it might fit in, and watch how he takes the discussion into a direction that doesn't seem relevant to the question at all, and then he just brings it back around. It's so brilliant. I already edited all of these questions before I have come on and giving these intros, so I watched it like 3 or 4 times right now, and I'm still amazed at how, like, it feels like he has all of these steps in place to figure out how best to help you guide your story. I'm obsessed. Take a look.
So there's this whole subplot that I've been considering, and it might be too much, but might as well throw it out here, where Devin, in the real world, he's recovered from his injuries from this car accident and is starting to date someone who Lee is really good friends with. And in the time loop, in the real world, Lee's, oh no, it's fine. In the time loop, goes through levels of annoyance until she ends up saying, you two kids should go talk, instead of having the fight again.
Yeah.
At a point. I don't know, especially when I want to also really get into her wanting to be a photographer and admitting that to herself, and deciding that it's okay to not be a lawyer and not have the stability and all that. I don't know if that's too much for her to focus on. And yeah, and just unnecessary with this whole I want Devin back thing.
Yeah. Well, she wants Devin back. She also tell me a little bit more about her sort of journey to accepting that she is going to be a photographer, not a lawyer.
Just as background, I've based her off of a friend I met in law school who is an amazing photographer. We did a study abroad to Morocco, and he was just taking National Geographic level pictures. He had a really nice camera, all this, and we all said, what are you doing? Said, I have already paid for school. I can't not be a lawyer. So, and that kind of defeatist attitude of, I guess I have to give up on my dreams because of sunk costs, is very prevalent among lawyers. So for her, she always saw photography as a fun hobby, but it's not stable enough. It's not reliable enough. Law's reliable. I make plenty of money. I'm able to go to this party in the hills. I'm dating someone who's respectable. We're going to be able to afford a house and 2.5 kids and a nanny to take care of all of them. But she has no joy in her life. Her whole life is just trying not to fail, is trying to hold on to this illusion of what safety and security is. I don't have a sense of how she's going to get to a point of, you know what, I do hate my life. I have saved up a bunch of money. I don't want to be a partner at this firm. I don't like anything that I'm doing. I want to go sell everything I own and take 6 months and travel around the world and take pictures and be happy. And Jonah is key in how she gets there, because he doesn't care if she is serious and knows everything. He's goofy and he allows her to just be silly, unlike the like stuck up group of people that she hangs out with. And Jonah's the comic relief for the group of friends, and he's sort of the court jester of the group, but he wants someone who wants to take him seriously, and Lee doesn't know how to not be serious, so it's like a two-way street there.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think then I think that subplot is not too much, especially if it connects to that idea of like, well, I'm already down this path, so I just continue it. Like I think there's also an element of that's maybe why she wants to be back with Devin, is because it's like, well, I'm already in this relationship. That's what I'm supposed to be, and so like I just need to like continue to do that. And so if that not that, you know, she's just thinking of Devin as a sunk cost, but
well, I mean, yeah,
but that, I mean, if that kind of idea is connected to Devin and to her career, then I think that this subplot works in really wonderfully. And it doesn't feel like it's too much, because it's actually just another kind of variation on the theme. And so the final sort of culmination of that isn't just saying like, hey, I'm, you know, stepping away from this relationship. It's actually actively pushing him towards someone else. And if that person also like makes Devin, I guess that's up to you, if that person kind of brings something out of Devin that he needs or whatever, you know, so depending on how much of this other character that he dates is going to be a punchline or not. I think that's a choice you have, you know, that can be kind of a light subplot, or just thematically can be incredibly resonant, especially if this is someone that can bring something to Devin's life that Lee simply couldn't. You know, maybe this person is like super silly in a way that like Lee and Devin could never be that way together. But for whatever reason, Devin responds to this person in a way that he doesn't with Lee. So a really lovely idea. Having her eventual, the real kind of stamp on like her journey is complete is, you know, instead of having the fight, saying, you know what, let's not fight. Why don't you go talk to her? And it's, you know, and then it's the person he'll end up dating.
All right, so we ended that there, but then we had a longer discussion full of a lot of ums and uhs, more than I even left in to these question and answer sessions. I was ruminating on how to change a lot of events in the third act and the end of the second act to ensure that Lee matching Devin up with her friend and showing that change was actually reflected within the story. Because if Lee's already at a point where she's giving Devin permission in the time loop to go off with the woman who he's interested in, who he's dating in the present day, then why would Lee want a date with Devin in Act 3? It just doesn't work. So there was some ruminating, a lot of discussion, and that's something that I need to work out in my rewrite of this outline. And this is why we do drafts of outlines, because I discover something I really like, I'm able to fit it into the story, but then the story has to change around it. And now let's move on to the final question that we're discussing. So at this point, I didn't really have any other questions, so I gave the floor to David, and he had a really interesting question about the end of the time loop and what it meant. And I got to get into a lot of my philosophy behind why this time loop movie is different from other time loop movies, and went a little full circle, because at the end of this discussion, I figured out something more about that scene ?
That I think that wraps up all of the questions that I came in with. Is there anything that struck you as we're talking that is speaking to you?
I did want to one of the things that I had sort of pinpointed was between 25 and 26. You know, 26, the butterflies fly away, and Um, I don't think it needs to be kind of an in-world reason they fly away, but is there, did not Devin, did Lee or Jonah like sort of turn the corner, and that's what allowed the time loop to kind of end, or is it just like just a matter of timing and this is when they're gone?
It's timing, and this is when they're gone. Sort of a randomness, which is, it doesn't feel entirely satisfying when I say it out loud.
Okay.
My hope with the randomness, and maybe there's a way to kind of create some meaning from it, is that this is almost like a nihilistic time loop, because literally they could do anything, and no matter what, they are not going to change anything that's happening in the future. They have to do that work themselves, because like the idea is that you can't change the past has already changed you. So it doesn't even matter if you can change the past, because something else is, you're a different person than you were back then.
Yeah.
The randomness of it all, it's just sort of, it's like the randomness of time and events. I love like kind of creating a narrative for my life in retrospect, but in reality, how much do all of these events lead to other things? The first time that I noticed people wearing sweatshirts with Greek letters on them was after I joined a sorority.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my mom, like, where did all these come from? There's so many people wearing these sorority sweatshirts. And she said, they've always been here. You just haven't seen them. So, like, I don't know how much our lives are narratives, as it is that we find the narrative once we know what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it does feel like there's a purpose and there's a direction, it's only direction because we've seen what's come before. So the butterflies don't really matter in the end.
Yeah.
I like that's where I'm going with it, but I don't know how to communicate that beyond just, oh, it's just random, which I know is entirely unsatisfying to an audience.
Well, I think part of what might be bumping me in that moment, Lee and Jonah both nearly text, they text each other the good news. I think and they don't, but even just characterizing as good news, I think we might want to feel like we've lost something, because I think that helps indicate a randomness of like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that to be over. And so them texting each other good news feels like they've been waiting for this to be over, but I think by this point they don't necessarily want that. And so if we see it through one of their perspectives, probably Lee, because like you said, she's maybe takes a little bit more of a pole position, but watching that, Lee goes and notices that the butterflies are gone, and we see her go through like, oh, wait a minute, what does that mean for what's going on with Jonah? Am I going to see him tonight, like in the time loop? Like watching that through her perspective, and realizing like, wait, I don't want that to be done. Yeah, I think that's the characterization. So maybe it's just a simple like order of sentences that I read it in the outline, and then that's all I'm bumping on.
Yeah, no, it's a good call out, and there's something in there that I didn't mention in any of the other cards, but I put that the butterflies are gone there. I am imagining that as the time loop progresses, we'll get not interstitial, but like transitional shots of like the butterflies flying, and there'll be fewer and fewer and fewer, and then the one before it, it's like there's 3, and then all of a sudden, and then same shot and nothing.
Yeah.
And that would be a call out for the audience. But it's interesting to think about what happens if they actually connect the butterflies to this time loop, because they don't go back there again.
Right. Yeah, and they just they figure they'll see each other when they go to sleep that night. I wonder if there's also an element of sort of placing something at the party that they want to do that that feels unfinished, that might unlike the fight and the car accident, which sort of have a great amount of meaning at the beginning and sort of start taking on less and less as the characters start to care less and less about these events. Something that might be kind of trivial at the beginning something they do in the time loop. Every time the time loop starts, they walk in the party and they always like, take this party favor and like put it on someone's head. And it's like a joke that they always play of like, they always mess with this dude. And it's something they enjoy together or something. And yeah, maybe they jokingly are saying, when they figure they'll see each other in the time loop that night, they reference this thing that they do. I don't know. I'm giving very bad examples.
No,
it's some idea of something, or even if it's like something trivial that they want to fix.
Yeah.
And maybe it's connected to like Jonah's set. He's like, because if he has this sort of time loop to kind of rehearse this set and see how it plays, it might be like a stand-up's dream, because it's like such a perfect control, because it's like the same audience, the same night. The only thing that he can change is his set. So like, if he's like, oh man, my set is killer now, except for this one joke, and I just can't get it to land, but I'm going to work on it every night. And that might be something that, we can really call attention to. Like, the time loop is gone, and he still has never been able to land this one joke. And then maybe that can, show up in scene 36 or 37. Finally, he figures it out. But if there's something that the time loop there's some element that feels unfinished, I think it's going to add to the randomness, the feeling of randomness. So like the butterflies are gone and like you don't get to do this thing, because by that point they have already started to devalue the other reasons they were in the time loop. But if there's one thing that does carry meaning that they don't get, that might just call attention to the fact, beyond just obviously they have a meaningful kind of experience with each other. But so it's more of just creating a textual thing within the time loop to play with that.
I said that they don't go back to where they got sucked in, but I mean, what if they do, like the next day they run into each other there? Maybe that's where they have that fight. They both try to go back.
Yeah, and you could probably never even say that, like that. It's just kind of maybe implied, or not even implied, but just built into the DNA of the script. Is like, why did this happen here? Is because secretly they both, consciously, subconsciously, they wanted to go back. And maybe that's part of that tension that they can't, because it's done, it's gone. But having that in that location, I mean, that location obviously carries a lot of emotional weight. So it's a great spot to have that scene.
And doesn't require a new location.
And it doesn't require a new location.
Yeah.
Win.
Yep.
So I promised you at the beginning we'd come full circle, and we totally did. So now scene question mark, or 26 and a half, or whatever I'm going to renumber it as, is going to take place in the location where Lee and Jonah first arrive in the time loop. I loved the symmetry of this whole discussion with David, and also the insights that he is giving and the questions that he asks, and the opportunity for me to just talk about my story, as you just saw, helped me come up with ideas and figure out problems. So if you were into what you saw on the screen, you want to book your own session with David, I highly recommend, especially if you have a story that you're trying to work out, or you just need someone who knows nothing about your story to go and take a look at it and tell you things about it. You need to book him. So I have put his info in the description bar below. Please click on it, book with him, and if there's a place to refer, tell him that you saw it right here on my YouTube channel. So now that I have all these notes from David, I need to go into my editing cave and figure out what changes and tweaks I need to make to this outline before I show it to somebody else. Now, next week is the day before Thanksgiving, / the day before my birthday, / the day that I'm going wedding dress shopping with my mom and grandma, my sister, and maybe my aunt and cousins. And I just showed you my ring. It's really pretty. But I will still have a video for you. What it is, not quite sure yet. So if you have a preference between screen sharing or me talking more about the notes that I got and what changes I'm going to make, put it in the comments. I will absolutely be a short order cook YouTube video artist. So if you vote in the comments, I will do your bidding as best I can. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, if you got something out of it, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, but you're digging this content and want to be part of this journey, please hit the subscribe button. We are almost at 100 subscribers, which means we are almost at the point where I can get a URL that you can actually like remember as opposed to all this crazy jumble of numbers and letters. I would love to get 100 by my birthday in 8 days. That would be awesome. And again, if you want to book with David Wappel, bloop, right in the description, there is a link. Please click it. He is really, as you can tell, fantastic at what he does and really helpful to writers. And he's a writer himself, so he understands all of the stuff that's sitting in your head because he has it happen to him too. Thanks again, all, and I will see you next week. I'm really big on these finger guns and I don't understand why.